Hi Mohit, welcome to the Be Fearless podcast.
Thank you, Vivek. Very excited to be here.
I think you and I go like a crazy long way back, right?
Yes.
Studied at IIT Guwahati barely a year apart.
Yes.
And I think I graduated 2004, you graduated 2005.
That's right.
Very, very long journey since then.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about your background, like right after IIT. I know you've done a lot of crazy things, became a professor, from there started a company and all of that.
Yeah.
So give us like an interesting summary of the whole history of Mohit after passing out till now.
I will try to make sure no one else passes out. In 2005, it was great. You were the hacker even when we were in undergrad, so one of the rare crew, so very excited to be here. Once I graduated, right before graduation, everyone does an internship. And I did an internship and I met this guy, Luca Benini. He's a really famous professor now. He was a young professor then.
Okay.
Just a few meetings in with him, I was like, I want whatever he's having. He was just so sharp, doing really interesting things. So I signed up for grad school, and it's essentially going to be a story of really impactful people. So I went to grad school and I met this professor, Tim Sherwood, who became my advisor, who was just having the most fun. He was like, oh, architecture is boring. We'll build completely new architectures. And why will we build it? Because security. You get the license to design completely new. He's a really creative guy. So I just kind of got hooked up with him, worked on our grad school thesis. Right around then, I fell in love with this problem of information flow. It feels like, hey, how is information flowing within your networks, within your companies, within your organizations, within hardware? So hardware is where we were. Once you kind of lock into this, every problem starts looking like an information flow. So I did a lot of work on that as a PhD student, went to Berkeley. Again, really impressive people that I really admired. I just met them at a conference like this, and they're like, hey, you should come over. So I was like, okay, I'll take a 2-year break as a postdoc, did more research on this. And that's when I noticed that Berkeley, they did a really good job of transitioning research into practice. So Databricks was starting out right then. I saw the founders just hanging out there, cooking it up. So that kind of became a goal that let's slow cook something valuable. So we took this field of information flow, moved to UT Austin as a professor, met some incredible students, worked with NSA, worked with, on the other hand, hospitals. And between the spectrum, we decided, there's a path through the cloud. All the things are becoming more API connected and such. We're like this classic long-term field. There's a path to bringing it to market in a way that makes sense as a technology, as a product, and then as a business. So we experimented for a few years at UT. And then once we decided we're going to go raise funding, we met some incredible VCs who are really lifelong security, just diehards. So they funded us. That was great. So then we spun out around 2020. And here we are.
Can you name some of your investors, the different funds?
That's right. So we had the strategy of recruiting one security-focused investor, so ForgePoint Capital. They are security-only, based out of Bay Area. They've just raised a Europe fund. Amazing, incredible, deep operators and deep background in security. Very strong community of security practitioners. And then on the other side, we balanced it out with Prefix Capital, which are deep tech investors. They have a lot of experience pulling people out of universities who don't know the B of business and helping them build the company, build the product, and so on. So those are the two key ones.
So tell us a little bit about the company, but before that, of course, like Symmetry Systems. Like why the name Symmetry Systems? How do you decide on the name, and then more about what the company does?
We took kind of a systems approach to security. Security and privacy, to me, is the outcome of a well-designed, well-balanced system. So if we depend on authentication, and once people have cracked MFA or whatever, now it's a full-blown party, right? Sometimes we say like, oh, AI or ML, and you just give it all the logs. You sort of not setting each primitive, security primitive up for success. Right? You can't just throw encryption at every problem or homomorphic encryption. You have to create a balanced, a more symmetric sort of construction of different solutions. And I hated this sentence. Will people say like, oh, security is an asymmetric problem. Attackers only need one door. And I'm like, but defenders set up the board. We set up the rules of the game. If we intentionally do it, we can make it a much more hostile place for attackers. So all these things. Now I have a colleague who will tell you that graphs are core to what we do. And a symmetric graph is mathematically a more secure, more kind of, like lower blast radius graph. So it's kind of is working out, sort of.
So it's almost like the elegance of simplicity in a way.
That's right.
Okay.
It's simple things that are being used to do what they are, it's in their operating range to be done.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can you describe like the overarching space the company is in, DSPM, couple of other interesting, but just explain these acronyms a bit for the audience as well.
Yeah, that's a really good, let's get to the acronym as a side effect of, so what we're doing is actually very simple. Like, as a security question, like I have a company, I have a ton of contractors, right? What customer data can these contractors access?
Yeah.
What did they access? Like, I need this for compliance, segregation of duties, all sorts of, I need this for security. Like, hey, Okta had this, right? Like, if some contractor got busted, what customer data is affected?
Right.
Is it 0? Is it 2? Is it 200, 400? Right? That question is very fundamental. Now, contractor is just one type of identity.
Right.
Log4j happens, and you say like, hey, all the vendors who reported Log4j vulnerability, did they move customer data out of production?
Right.
So there's all these questions are about an identity type and about a data type. And you can just go through, we went through contractors, like vendors, you can say like pre-attack or post-attack. Pre-attack, you can say, where is my bigger blast radius? Post-attack is like, what's the blast radius of this particular incident? Give me an identity, what's the blast radius of this identity?
Right.
What can they do? What did they do? So there is a permissions question and there is a actual operations. Did you perform? So all of this action is happening on this data identity graph, more fundamentally. And once you have that, 10 different problems all boil down to this fundamental like graph question of, is this identity type doing the right thing or not?
Right.
So you could have this for confidentiality, but you could also have this for integrity or availability, that, hey, is everything I care about flowing into a DR and disaster recovery environment?
Okay.
Is my DR environment, disaster recovery environment, more safe than my regular environments?
Okay.
Or can the same people transitively find their way? One of my coolest findings, my colleagues that they did was across average across all the cloud environments, by compromising 5 identities, not 5%, 5 identities, you could take down 80% and above of that environment in the cloud. Because of all these transitive permissions that, you can get to a role here, role there, and you just have overprivileged roles. So that's these are the type of questions that we are trying to answer. This is binned under data security, then DSPM. All of these are sort of acronyms, but this is the heart of what we're trying to get to. Now,
makes sense.
One thing I learned was that once you have a fundamental asset category, data and identity and data flows, you can build workflows that look like identify, then detect, or protect, like the NIST kind of model. So DSPM is the identify pillar for data and identity and data flows as an asset. Meaning, tell me what's going on. It's like posture. How does it look today? Are contractors sitting on too much? Is there a ton of dormant data built up? Things like this. Am I sitting on data risk? Right. Once you see something, you can say like, hey, you have to say something. You have to do something. Right. Set up seatbelts. Detect. Right. While you go and fix the problem through, I have to change my ETL pipeline for my data lake. Let's not take a ton of PII and spew it into my data lake. Right. So those are more kind of involved architectural changes. So you can go from identify to detect to protect, and at some point you're running all of these just at different time scales.
Okay.
So that's what we do.
Can you give an example of maybe like an attack or something else which gets detected? Based upon solution like Symmetry is being deployed, like one interesting example. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, so one really simple one could be Log4j happened. Right. Every vendor, like every company we worked with, were like, hey, 30 vendors have reported Log4j, and there's tons of service roles that are lying around. And now you're running around like, fixing and patching and burning the midnight oil. But the first and most important question is customer data affected by any of these affected vendors? So we can run a simple search. This was 30 seconds for us to be like, hey, no customer data has left your production. Here's the evidence. You can now relax and go patch those things. And in the meantime, put a detect on it so that if something does get exploited and misbehaves, you have seatbelts. So you can set up a detection response thing where like, hey, this particular service role has had a tight envelope of behavior. Stick within that until I get this patched.
Okay, makes sense.
So that's a big one. There's many others, right? You can say the Okta scenario was very similar.
Yeah. I mean, I know almost like all security companies, when it comes to their customers, there's so much of confidentiality, NDA.
Yes.
But is there any interesting like public case study that you guys have put out for any of your customers which you're okay sharing?
Let me see which. So I can. Yeah, we have anonymized case study, so I can kind of take you the size and scale and the use cases.
Yeah, that should be good enough. Yeah.
Perfect. So one of the Fortune 50 big retailers, we are in their complete all environments. So we are in their on-prem Hadoop. They are like more than 5 million data sets. We are in all three cloud, AWS, GCP, Azure, and we are in their Office 365. So the way I look at it, this is like you have a data lake environment, you have a product environment where engineers, developers are doing, and then you have a corporate environment.
Yeah.
And you have similar questions, but very different plumbing and workflows for each environment.
Right.
So in these places, we have helped them essentially in a DSPM posture check manner. We were able to identify tons of redundant, dormant data that was just not needed. So they didn't need to move this from Hadoop to GCP. Right? That's a big cost savings right there, like many times over right there.
Yeah.
But we can also find like, hey, here are all your risky identities, like contractors who potentially have been even disabled and offboarded from Active Directory.
Right.
But it hasn't transitively been offboarded all the way. And here are all the crown jewel data, financial reports and things that are available to you.
Okay.
Right. So we were able to show a whole bunch of these scenarios and kind of take care of them very quickly. Concretely, like thousands of identities we were able to offboard. Now, this statistic of over 1,000 identities is from a different manufacturer.
Yeah.
But a data lake, we were able to offboard over 1,000 identities in their environment that just were lying around. And in a third environment, we were able to again show lots of data that was sensitive, that was just lying around, and they were able to clean out about 25% of production data.
Okay.
So this is like outcomes that you can drive just proactively through security architecture.
Interesting.
On the detect side, at an international like manufacturing company, we were able to show that they have backups going to these specific IP S3 buckets. Now there is a Tor exit node coming from another foreign country, essentially hitting relentlessly this backup IP bucket.
Okay, very interesting.
How does that URL even leak?
Yeah.
Right? Someone is coming through and permission drift has to happen just momentarily and this data is out.
Right.
I think Twilio or someone had this case where there was a momentary 20 minutes or so, some bucket got changed, like permissions were accidentally opened. Someone dropped malware there and that got shipped out.
Okay.
So you can have this problem for confidentiality or integrity as well.
Yeah. I mean, I know, you guys are kind of like the pioneers in this. You started long time back, even before like DSPM was coined as a phrase by, I don't know, whoever, right?
Gartner.
Was it Gartner? Of course, it's always,
yes.
It's always Gartner.
Thank you, Gartner, wherever Gartner is. That was great work.
So tell us a little bit about like, the uniqueness of your architecture.
Yeah.
And I know there are a lot of, I would say, DSPM companies, coming up now every few months.
That's right.
What is the key differentiation and, how does your architecture around all of this like really stand out?
Yeah, absolutely. The most important thing is that as a security company, as a company that's going to host or help you reduce data risk, I don't want to start by adding data risk. We live fully in the customer's environment. So we are deployed at your favorite space agency. There's a bunch of them, but you can pick. We're deployed in FedRAMP environments. We're deployed in PCI environments. We are org-wide. We don't just do small little pilots. It's like org-wide. So in all these cases, most regulated companies, they want Symmetry to live completely in their environment. The product lives. There's no backend. I don't get data. I don't get metadata. That's a huge, just off the bat architectural advantage.
Okay.
In fact, in the Cool Vendor Guide in 2022, when they introduced DSPM, Gartner called this out at the top of the document. That this is an innovative approach that blah, blah, blah. Right? So that's a fundamental starting block. And the second big thing is we don't treat this as let's do one more data classification phase for the industry. And that has never succeeded in our data classification, data catalogs category. It's not succeeded with DLP. This is a really mobile, kind of very volatile space where companies introduce new data types and things move around a lot.
Yeah.
So you can't view this as a classify your data project. That's how a lot of DSPM vendors kind of want to it because they just want to stay in that bin. We view this as you have to understand data, you have to understand identities and all the permissions,
Yeah.
and you have to understand operations. So to understand permissions, you have to parse cloud permissions. It's like a CIEM tool halfway to the cloud permissions, and then data store entitlements. Like Alice, the contractor, walked through the cloud.
Yeah.
Then they went into a RDS database, looked at a materialized view, and saw customer data. Like make this entire line, entire graph for me.
Okay.
And then you have to also process access logs. That's a fire hose. Like
Yeah.
data plane events are not even turned on.
Yeah.
So now if you put this together, like, hey, I want to answer the simple question, did Alice touch my customer data? You have to do these three things, but fully in the customer environment. I can't just drop it into BigQuery and say like, hey, Google, please solve this
Yeah.
for me. So that's the key thing. That's why our, like at these big regulated places, we go through faster than the highest market cap security company in terms of vendor risk audits.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because they are like, yeah, we'll do all this work and then we'll take even metadata back. Whereas we get airdrop because it's a data guard in a box.
Yeah. So what are the plans like, product wise, company wise,
Yeah.
maybe the next like year, 2 years, like, whatever you have on your roadmap? Just curious to see like, how you're thinking of evolving from where you are today.
So the first thing that we are really focused on right now is we have this engine that maps out data flows, understands data and identities and data flows. How can we get this integrated into as many workflows as possible? So we have compliance users who are like, hey, they have to answer for, did privileged people touch customer data, segregation of duties, who accessed my PCI environment data, data residency, like did customer data leave my Middle Eastern environment or Indonesia or something? Let's build really focused workflows and rule packs, essentially like firewall rule kit pack, policy kits, whether it is a well-defined policy, whether it's supervised or unsupervised ML, we can all blob this together under kind of like a firewall would, like a data.
Yeah.
So I think just those workflows and then workflows for security teams, where like, hey, build me a policy kit, kind of a set of workflows for third-party risk, for privileged access risk, for anomalous, service roles kind of risk, right? So these type of just really tight workflows, because the key is security teams, they understand the business abstractly, but they're not in the day-to-day of like how are roles and data being ETL'd and like who is getting access to what, how is sharing happening. So let's just make them superheroes, kind of like your comic, right? Like get the security team, data security team to be like, they have full visibility and they're driving big change. So I think that's the immediate, we are pretty deep into it over the next 3 months. A lot of this will roll out, compliance rule packs. We have a great compliance guy on our team. But what we are also doing is we are really huge fans of open evaluation. I don't want this to be like, oh, I like this guy's face or this guy's investor and hence I bought their product. It has to be, let's stress test this. So we're building like AI-based, like reinforcement learning-based agents that can go in and stress test your cloud environment to see like what is the risk, what is the maximal risk, how many nodes should I compromise, or what's sort of the average residual risk that you're sitting on, like tons of dormant data that is sensitive, but that's also exposed to these paths, so that you just have this kind of automated data security related pen tester in your environment.
Right.
And then there's some simple things like, hey, we have a really beautiful graph that non-technical people love to interact with. It's a visual workflow, but then the key is like, can we make it just conversational? Right? You can ask things like, hey, where's the data risk? What should I do about it? So there's a lot of kind of predictive modeling of, if I make these IAM changes, if I do this role mining, you shouldn't have people go to an engineering role. An engineering role takes you to everything. So congratulations, you have our back, but it's everyone has access to everything, right? So let's help you refactor this graph so that now you're creating much more tiny islands with moats and drawbridges, right? That makes sense for your org. So those are the more advanced sort of machine learning powered workflows. But just nailing the basics, I think is already the kind of high priority for us.
And when you look at challenges around security, around data security, what do you predict is going to be the greatest challenges for enterprises in the next like 2 to 3 years based upon how everything is moving?
So I think the next 2 to 3 years, there are huge low-hanging fruit wins to be had, like data minimization, right? Clear out tons of dormant permissions and identities and such, and then set up really great guardrails around your most valuable crown jewels. There are big wins to be had. I feel like that will probably dominate the narrative. So this field is going to jump pretty quickly for that. I think the challenges will start at that point, because now you're trying to bring. There's no way this can be like a product that slides in like CrowdStrike and no one really knows about it.
Yeah.
You have to bring your data lake team into the mix.
Yeah.
Right? Sure, I fixed a bunch of initial problems, but run and maintain. How can we be tight such that your ETL pipelines, when you bring data from someone's Salesforce or whatever, you're always in the clear.
Right.
So I think it's a huge opportunity to build sort of SDKs, developer toolkits for data scientists or for developers. And then there's orthogonal problem. The biggest one, the most unstructured problem even, is tons of unstructured data. All my corporate employees, I'm going to let co-pilots loose there. Yeah. That is a hard as hell problem. We just presented at the AI Village on this.
Yeah.
But like that's a really, really hard one. But these two are more tractable and big win problems as well.
Okay. Right? Tell us a little bit about the talk you gave at DEF CON. What was it about?
Oh, yeah.
And
so it was basically this scenario that we just talked about, where companies, they have lots of corporate environment, could be Microsoft, could be Google, like lots of data in a corporate environment. And now the permissions are usually lax, especially you have merged a bunch of companies and now this folders lying around that no one knows what's even there, like who can access what. And once you enable Copilot type tools there, right, they're going to go and explore, list out everything, index the entire environment, use kind of vector indexing or vectors to kind of do similarity searches. And so there's a lot of statistical workflows that are not very precise in terms of permissions. And now the question is like, someone asked a question like, hey, what salary does Vivek make in the company? Is it more, who is going to get fired? Like we have found these type of queries you can even answer. Tell me what is the sales plan for the next year for Latin America. So there's a confidentiality problem, but what we showed here was that you can start planting wrong information. You can run a misinformation campaign.
Interesting.
You can make a file, put some content in there, make it open to your company. You can do that, it's your file.
Yeah.
Discretionary access control, right? But now co-pilots are picking it up, your CEO's co-pilot picks it up. And they think that like, the sales are tanking over here and there and now making bad plans. Right? So if you're using generative AI to synthesize unstructured information into something, this is a pretty major attack vector, and we're showing live examples on live deployments.
And you disclosed this to the vendor and they got back to you, fixed it. What happened there?
Oh, and so this is not in the, I don't want to call out any vendor. This is not a vendor layer. We actually replicated this on all the a bunch of open source LLMs, RAG-based LLMs as well.
Everybody,
So this is a conceptual problem, right? Like
got it.
If a RAG tool is going to index all the data and surface it, and anyone can mess around with the access control, just like access control plus a confused deputy, like a deputy who's just indexing everything for you and surfacing it, right? And then there's all this similarity search which are not precise. That's the problem. So we don't treat this as a vendor specific problem. These are just examples. They will rightfully say like, hey, this is shared responsibility. You should have perfect access control and perfectly honest employees. It's not my problem. So.
And is this your first DEF CON?
Yes, this is my first DEF CON.
So what was your experience, this year? Like how does it like map and compare against like other conferences?
Right. So obviously the most number of conferences I've gone to are academic conferences, which are fun for a different reason. I love the number of hands-on workshops that are going on here. Right. The Aerospace Village is awesome. The AI Village was awesome. You're getting hands-on experience with LLMs and jailbreaking them. The talks are there. The talks are a big part. They're very demo heavy. That's also really nice. So I love this. I mean, I think that when I run the lab part of our work again, like I will basically, I think, make it mandatory that everyone who is new to this field, they should just spend a whole week here. And do hands-on workshops. It's been great, and it's great to actually connect with
finally
long lost folks.
Before we end this, any interesting message or any interesting insight that you want to pass on to the audience, like what Symmetry is working in, or about the industry, the space?
I was about to say that it's been amazing to meet Vivek. Please, everyone, go meet Vivek. That's my interesting insight. Around Symmetry, I think like the biggest insight is that all the trends are aligned such that I think security can have essentially a TensorFlow moment where you define security and operate it at a very high level of abstraction, data and identities. And right now we are giving visibility, but you can also do just synthesize infrastructure as code based on your data and identity policies, right? You can also do detection, but the detection works really tightly with the infrastructure that you synthesized. So that you're not using AI for things that are not statistical in nature, just blindly analyzing logs.
Yeah.
Right. So this is to me like a moment where we can unlock. Once we have a handle on our data and identities as the core assets, you can unlock big changes. So don't view this as like, oh, this is like a small line item, fads come, fads go. I think this is a big transitional moment where infrastructure is just generated. Firewalls, network firewalls, yeah, that's all auto-generated, right? Service meshes are amazing for that, right? And then on the detection side, AI is great, but don't just give it crap information, right?
Yeah.
It is set up to specifically look for places where you're doing recon and failing. We see this all the time. Threat actors come in, they're trying to move around, so errored operations are a huge thing. But if your environment is just poorly set up, everything is erroring all the time, you won't see that as a signal.
Yeah.
So putting this visibility, the synthesis, and detection to all work together, I think this could be like a huge, once in a 50-year opportunity to abstract out the junk that we don't like and like drive security like someone would drive a plane.
Yeah.
Right? Like respond quickly and take human intuition about your organization, your business risk, but it translates out org-wide quickly.
Okay.
I think that's the
Awesome. Yeah. Fantastic. So it's very nice having you on the show. Absolutely, us meeting and talking after so many years was also fantastic. We met at RSA.
Yes.
It was nice to meet you again, and hopefully we get to meet.
I had been tracking you the whole time. You're like the original YouTuber, when it comes to security, right? That was amazing. I'll hope to emulate stuff you were doing to teach people.
You're being too kind.
Teach again. So.
Thank you so much, Mohit. It was great having you on the show. Thank you.
Hi, Mohit. Welcome back to the Fearless podcast.
Thank you, Sasha, for having me.
Yeah, so this is going to be more of an informal part, just to know what's it like to be a CEO, and we know you founded this company, Symmetry Systems. So would love to just to know how your day looks like.
How my day looks like?
Yes.
I'm not sure there is a pattern to the day. I think it's, luckily, it kind of changes across the stages of the company.
Okay.
When you start off, you're sort of on the hook for everything, right?
Okay.
This is like 5 people and your pet dog. Okay. So that's a lot different than now. We are much larger, we have specific functions. So these days it's very much kind of outward looking, thinking about how to take the message.
But this is more about you. How does your day look like? What time do you wake up?
Oh, wow. Okay. Ooh.
What's your routine like for someone that wants to become a CEO of cybersecurity company?
Yeah.
What are they supposed to do to be like you?
Oh, that's really great. So I have some complications in that I have 3 kids. We have an 8-year-old, a 2.5, and a half.
Okay,
right?
Have to manage them all.
As a team, me and my wife, we both do this. But that just means that when you wake up and you want to have a Zen morning, there are like random packets interjecting on you. Yeah, so that happens. Then you sort of, get people to school and such. And then I think you really get cranking. And I think the theme for my day is usually that different types of work and also home things, these are all sort of happening at once. So there's usually some internal meetings, some external meetings. There's some big project of the day, of the week that's going on, like some big pilot is due and you're working on those, or some outcomes due to your investors or future prospects and things that's due, or some big event or trip is coming up. There's some project that's going on, so that takes up a bunch of time. And then when the day ends, our colleagues are in India, so there's things happening there that you want to kind of check in / not check in really. It's more like kind of learn as to what. There's a lot of context sharing that is needed. We are a very small team, building a very large surface area product, and then selling in a nascent market, which means there's just a lot of uncertainty all around.
I can
So
imagine.
for us, it's like critical for the companies just being alive, to lots of people kind of synchronizing all the time.
Yeah.
Right. So that is a kind of a big part of my day.
So how do you manage your personal life and your work life all together? How do you find this balance?
Step 0 is find a partner. That I found a partner that who is just amazing. Like she did top shelf science, published in the top paper. So it really knows that hard things take hard work, and she's also super committed to having the family be like a good unit. So I think like that engagement, and sort of I'm like an IC, and so I think that organization or just alignment out there is the biggest one. And there's a mindset of like chaos happens, we both are fine with a chaotic environment.
So for aspiring entrepreneurs, step number 1 is to find the right partner.
Or do it by yourself, so then there is no partner, no kids, no nothing, and now you're managing your own energy and whatnot. That could be possible, but if you're building a long-term startup and you want to go long, having just friends, having family and friends aligned with that mission, to me, as a hack, what we also did is a bunch of the key people in the company are really long-term friends. So our COO, I went to grad school with him, and he's just amazing. He went a different path, founded a company, sold it, ran a P&L. He just knows business 100x, 1000x more than I do, right? But we are also friends. I was quote unquote the pseudo best man at his wedding. So we're just synchronizing, aligning all the time. Our head of engineering also went into undergrad with me. Our core technical co-founders and forward deployed folks are also from UT Austin. We work together for research, which is also similar. So again, there's a lot of people who are aligned with the way the company needs to be.
I tend to ask this question, Vivek, as well. I was like, who are your best friends? And he tends to say, you guys. Because he just spends so much time with us that it's a lot about who you spend time with, right?
That's right.
And then
That's exactly
if you're looking in the same direction, it really
that's right.
helps you to see this vision more clearly.
That's right. And I think there's a detail there that I learned, again, scar tissue that you learn is that you can have really great folks who are really aligned. You all think alike, but maybe at detailed day-to-day level, you might work differently. And a startup is such a tight group of people that the day-to-day style is also really important. So for me, like, folks can call me anytime. Like, it doesn't matter if it's 2 a.m. at night, I'll take the call. It's just not a problem, right? So I think our environment, at least Symmetry's environment, needs alignment that is just kind of total, right? You're
always there for each other.
Yeah, exactly. And there are other ways of working where you just sort of fork things off and we will synchronize 30 minutes every week. But you're just so amazing that like great things are happening and we're all just relaxing, and that would be amazing. But that's just not a style that would have worked for us. So
I just feel like when you're there for people, then other people are there for you.
Also true. Yeah.
And that's why, especially in a startup, you always want this mechanism to work all together as efficiently as possible. And you just have to be there for each other.
I just realized there's a third part to this. We covered to the third part, I think, that I've found to be recurringly really important.
What is
that no matter how well you're aligned today, there is going to be a time where you might feel that things are going out of alignment. Okay. Right? And it's really like you're moving super fast and there's a lot of stress and there's deadlines and there's all this like high pressure feeling environment, right? It's not, doesn't need to be, but it feels like it sometimes. But in that moment, if something goes off, you want to be able to bounce back quickly. So I think there's like a recent talk that Federer and Djokovic both independently mentioned, when the point is over, you reset and you're kind of neutral for the next point. And I think that is so important in a startup because so many points are being played all the time. You're winning some, you're losing some. You can't carry state with you like, oh, I'm so bummed about this or that. Just reset as a team and just continue moving on. You trust in the long-term intentions and capability, competence of each other and just continue crushing.
You just have to move on. And I think it's pretty easy to be aligned when things are going smoothly.
Exactly.
But it really tests you when things just don't work out. I think even for us, we had this conference and we have like a certain plan, things gonna run smoothly, but then they never do, and you just have to be ready for it. You just have to bounce back and be back in the game.
That's right.
So what advice would you give to entrepreneurs? Like, one is find a great partner or meet a partner later on. And then maybe
partner in all dimensions, personal life and startup life that are just compatible. I think that is that's the advice I would say.
And then
that's
from
the lesson.
Personal development, what advice would you give that people would feel this is the right time for me, let's say, to leave my job and start my own company? What would you say when it comes to cybersecurity? Like, this is the right time.
Yeah, that's a good point. Vivek has run N companies. He has this needs more like a statistical test. For me, really, it was that we had a lot of conviction in the science behind it. We had worked on that. We had tried it in many different ways that we think could work. Then the key thing really was to try to get interacting with the users. Like, okay, let's say I want to use information flow, whatever we work on, for healthcare. So just start diving into that. If you want to use it for developers, once you sort of get into a really tight loop, I think naturally, and you have to think of it as a full graph. Like, okay, the users, what are they using it for? Okay, they're happy, but then who's going to buy it and how's that purchase happen? Not just building an open source project for users. And if you're doing that, then that's great.
Yeah.
But if you're building a company, you sort of flushing out the graph that the company operates in.
I see.
How do my customers, how are they going to use this, buy it, and kind of how will this grow? But how will us as a company, right? How do we want to try to grow? And you're just setting up like lots and lots of really frequent, experiments essentially, and learning really quickly. And then I think like at some point you just get enough intuitions plus information, data, whatever, right? Like to be like, look, I have a lot of conviction that I can get this far. Right, and I found that talking to, and people are so incredibly generous. It's amazing how that is, right? And just talk to folks who, like, if I unroll the loop into this type of company, there are other people who have done similar things with, at a company level, at a business level, even if not at the exact same product level. They have a lot of advice, and just trying to seek very contradictory sounding advice, and process it with it, and then you sort of know that, hey, look, for every decision pretty much, right? When should I spin out? If you spin out, what do you do next? Things like this. And it took me years, actually, even in the start. Every domain takes a couple of years to even just get warmed up. And then you start getting better every, 6 months to 12
Customer
months.
feedback is just so important, and user feedback is so important. And even for us, that's why we're actually doing research where we meet CISOs and we ask, can you tell us what are your pain points? Because we don't want to be putting something out there that just doesn't resonate with someone.
That's right. That's
right. I think we also spoke to some other entrepreneurs and they said exactly the same thing.
I see.
User feedback.
That's right.
My partner.
Buyer feedback.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, exactly. So, okay, then what... I think when it comes to cybersecurity space, it's always about how talented you are and how strong your soft skills are. What would you say is sort of a right balance of it?
That's a good one. I think that's a really important question actually for cybersecurity specifically. And the reason I think that now is cybersecurity really has no metrics. Like, you're a really large company, right? You did this measure. Did you improve security or not?
Yes.
Right? There's like 100 opinions around this. So really, you're trying to find judgment calls around what outcome am I trying to drive towards?
Yes.
Right? And then you have to get a lot of buy-in from all the way from CFO to data officers to... You have to bring the rest of your team along, right?
So many variables.
That's exactly right. So I think if you're a practitioner, I just noticed that one of our favorite CISOs, it's like a full-blown community manager in a way, both inside his company and outside. And he runs this organization called CISO XC. It's out of Dallas, and tons of people. And it's not just for CISOs. It's also for students in the community.
That's awesome.
Like most security students that... When I was a student or my student, they have never met a CISO before. They have never met a whole hierarchy of people who run security operations. So it's just getting that exposure out, and so that students can also see like, hey, I would like to grow up into X, or I might try this for a while. I think that is so important. And I think for cybersecurity especially, soft skills that eventually lead to sort of community forming a consensus on what is valuable and how to move forward. I think that is super, super important. Super important.
And I just cannot say how thankful I am to be here at DevCon. just because
Is this your first DEF CON?
this
as
is
well?
my first DEF
Oh,
CON.
wonderful. Amazing.
Yeah, thank you. So this is for me mind-blowing how many smart people there are in cybersecurity space and how openly they share their research.
That's right. That's right.
And this helps grow this whole community, and it's just incredible getting to know so many smart people.
Yeah.
And you learn communication skills, not just
Yeah.
something technical, but
Yeah.
you just learn to see how the whole cybersecurity system operates within. So
That makes sense. And your lens coming into cybersecurity or DEF CON was, did you have like a security background? Did you
I did
come
not.
from?
Okay, I
Interesting.
have to be honest. My cybersecurity background is 1 month.
Oh,
It's
amazing.
1 month.
That's great.
Yeah.
We know so many great people who come from different parts of the business,
Yes.
risk, or just creative background. We have a guy in our company who is a data visualization person.
Okay.
He's like, I want to build Google Maps for data security. That's
Okay.
how he sees it. So everything is abstracted out, and the whole goal is how do we make something beautiful that attracts
Yeah.
the non-security diehards in the company
Yeah.
to admire the problem
Yeah.
and solution and so on. So I mean, your different background could be your greatest asset for the community.
Yeah. I think especially in a startup because our technical folks, they're so smart, and then we have someone else in marketing, in PR, and
Yeah.
just getting to know everyone's opinion and seeing this whole mechanism starting to work together
Yeah,
is just
right,
so
right.
incredible, so beautiful.
Amazing. And your lens into Square X is along the go-to-market side, on the company building side, or
It's go to market. Don't
Oh,
go to
wonderful.
market. So
wonderful?
yeah, we are super
Amazing.
super excited. So maybe one of the last questions is, yeah, do you have any regrets? And if you could change something, what would it be?
We could, in theory, change a lot of. So I can almost view them as two separate questions. I actually, so far, so good on the regrets front.
Okay.
We have, there's a lot of personal things and technical things, and just sort of out and about working outside, interacting with quote unquote outside folks.
Yeah.
I think we have tried to represent our values as best as we can so far. When things worked and when they didn't work, both. So I don't have anything in the regrets bin. What would I have changed? I think to me, I'm just getting better and better at learning how to kind of map out and learn a new field quicker and quicker. And there are just recurring lessons. And what I would change is I would just learn them faster, and then apply
Just
them.
the speed.
Yeah, exactly. Just get better at like, okay, now you're in a new community, there are new lessons, new values. How do you flesh that out quickly? So
Yeah.
again, talking to Vivek today was
Yeah.
awesome, right? Like he
Yeah.
had a lot of advice around how to think
Yeah.
as you go to the next stage of the company. I'm like,
Yeah.
should be doing that more.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, we only have 24 hours in a day, so
Right,
there is
right.
only that much that we can
That's right.
squeeze in.
That's right. That's right.
But
That's right.
yeah, but so maybe the final question: how do you see cybersecurity space evolving?
This is the most exciting time in the history of security, I would say. Maybe ever, but at least in the last 30 years, like easily. You can say that, they were disconnected machines, networks got made, and there was a bunch of work around network security. Now I think the pivotal moment that we are seeing is on the technical side, all the infrastructure is disappearing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's all automated, devices are disposable. It's just
Yeah.
people walking around ambiently interacting with stuff, all backed by data centers.
Yeah.
I think you can't just hand rack servers. It's just, like everything is virtual and programmed. So I think that is an opportunity to root security in something that is much more human. Right?
Yeah.
Like if I share a project with you, I only want you to see the data.
Yeah.
Instead, I have to give it to an app who gives it to 200 other services,
Yes.
and it goes to N places. And
Yeah.
it's like you don't even know when Facebook and Cambridge Analytica happened. They were like, yeah, we didn't know we were giving data. We told them to delete it.
Visibility
course.
is a big issue.
Right. And visibility and then synthesis. Like we ended the previous interview on this note, so I don't want to bore you with that details. But I just think that this is the biggest lever. It should feel very personal and intimate. Your security for you, like your identity is, protected, and you sort of naturally go in and out of your context and all the information is tied to your context. Like we have this interview.
Yes.
Let's say this is meant to be shared, but if we were in a company meeting, maybe there is a context for who that should, who should. Let's just translate that everywhere, no matter it's on your personal assistant device that you talk to the data centers. And Signal is an app that people love. That, hey, I sent you a message, only you and I should see it.
Yes.
Why can't we have this for everything?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely.
So I think this is now all the technical side, the business side, and the just society's expectation. People keep saying GDPR is good, bad. It's just regular people, non-computer science people telling us what they want.
Yeah.
And now we as technical/business people, we can build a new infrastructure that is just much more respectful, much nicer to people and their privacy.
This is definitely our responsibility, a responsibility of new technology to make sure that everyone feels protected.
Yes.
That your solution responds to that particular problem.
That's right.
And
so does SquareX. I loved your disposable browser stuff.
Yes.
It's like, a lot of places I go to, I actually want it not tied to me. It's an anonymous mode, but for everything, right?
Yeah.
It's awesome.
This is very exciting time to be in the cybersecurity space.
That's true.
And it's such a pleasure having you here, Mohit.
Thank you
so
Sasha.
much.
Thanks for having us.